Donald Trump just tacoed on the 48-hour threat to strike Iranian infrastructure. That means the 48-hour strikes are done and off the table, and all strikes by the United States have now been paused for 5 days. Donald Trump citing negotiations with Iran. Now, there's a reason why we're using air quotes here, because, well, let's just say Iran was making some pretty crazy threats right before this U-turn from Donald Trump. One of them included strikes by anyone who purchases U.S. Treasury bonds. And yesterday around 11 o'clock at night, I was looking at futures and I'm like, futures don't always indicate what direction trading is going, but I was looking at the futures in the bond market and I was like, oh my gosh, we're skyrocketing past 4.4% on the 10-year. I'm like, this isn't great. People are actually starting to sell treasuries in the futures market because of these comments. But it's not just that. Iran threatening, quote, U.S. Treasury bonds are soaked in Iranians' blood. Purchase them. And you purchase a strike on your headquarters and assets, which is wild. It's like these sort of like lash out threats because of Donald Trump's 48-hour threat to conduct energy infrastructure strikes against Iran. But you also have these threats now, which some people call a false flag, but other people are saying no. Iran actually does have long-range missile weaponry, and they have this opportunity to strike deep inside of Europe now. On top of that, you have this allegation that really Iran wasn't backing off at all in response to Donald Trump's threat. If anything, Iran was doubling down. You actually have the Ayatollah making a statement that the Supreme Defense Council, not the Supreme Leader, threatened to lay more naval mines throughout the Persian Gulf if its coasts or islands come under attack. So in other words, this idea that, hey, all right, we'll unleash even more mines in the Strait of Hormuz. That'll keep that shut down longer. Yesterday, we were talking about the potential for mines to be attached to cargo ships, which is actually an old strategy that was used back, I believe, in World War II. But there are these things called limpet mines that they're sort of these larger round things with handles. There's a giant magnet, basically. You load them up with C4, and someone on a speedboat can just plunk it onto the side of a cargo ship. Really hard for military to compete with because these people pretend to just be fishermen sort of paddling around, fishing. Cargo ship comes near, drop the rods, speedboat over, plunk, boom, C4 attached. Pretty wild. So anyway, things were ramping up over the last 24 hours really severely as Iran was making it obvious that they were not going to back down and to Donald Trump's 48-hour threat. And if anything, they were going to ramp up attacks. Now, it's possible that Iran was just being a paper tiger, but then again, they've been ramping up their strikes. Well, Pete Hegseth is still using the data that suggests their drone and missile launches have come down 90%, which was true from day 1 of the war to day 8 of the war. We know that their drone and missile launches have ramped up since then. Now, this 5-day pause from Donald Trump comes because Donald Trump says that he's having productive conversations with the Iranians. He says, quote, I'm pleased to report that the United States of America, notice he doesn't say I, he says the United States of America, which in fairness, this has already been happening. I'll explain this in just a moment. But anyway, pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have, over the last 2 days, had very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Based on the tenure and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for 5 days. So again, those are just the strikes against energy infrastructure and Iranian power plants that are frozen for 5 days. I didn't clarify that earlier in this video. So I may have implied that all strikes were stopping. I just want to be clear about that. Subject to the success of ongoing meetings and discussions. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald Trump. Okay. So this is a very familiar pattern with Donald Trump. it's sort of like we get liberated and then we're going to have a 90-day pause. We had many pauses and extensions of pauses to sort of strike deals and negotiate. But Iran since came out and says that Trump's media statement is, quote, psychological warfare. Iran says it is not in talks, and there have been no talks with Trump. Now, both of these things could be true at once. The IAEA Inspector General has made the argument that the United States has already been using background channels to try to communicate with Iran, and that some background channels were communicating back. So this suggests that, you could make this stretch of an argument that underlings in the United States and somewhere in Iran have had some form of communication. This is kind of like, remember how we had negotiations basically all of February before the strikes actually began? It's entirely possible these people exchanged cell phone numbers and they've been texting each other like, oh man, hey, you think we can get back to talks? And Donald Trump is sort of picking up on this idea that, oh, okay, so somebody in the United States has had conversations with Iran. Okay, sounds good. Let's use that as a basis for delaying this 48-hour threat, given that Iran is clearly lashing out even worse. It's also worth noting that just before this U-turn from Trump, Iran stated that it would target all fuel, energy, tech, and desal infrastructure in the region. Really important, especially for the Saudis. Yemen doesn't use a lot of desal, but Saudi Arabia does. And so, they're a much richer country, and desal is actually pretty expensive, desalination. But anyway, when you put all of this together, it does actually make you wonder, is this just Taco Tuesday coming early? Now, obviously, the good news here in the short term is oil has collapsed on this, which is great. If you take a look here, you can see oil, which was down at about 111, is down about 7.5%, which is great. You've got the 10-year Treasury, which is kind of where it was Friday morning, so it hasn't really gone a full port U-turn here, down to about 4.36. And the big risk factor in markets today is going to be, are institutions going to believe Donald Trump's taco, or are we going to see all of this sort of like sell down on this move down on oil and this move down on rates reverse intraday? That's going to be the big thing to pay attention to, and obviously watching oil and the bond market is going to be a great early tell for us. But you can see here the initial enthusiasm in Bitcoin's reaction running almost straight up to my yellow line here at 71,246, running to 71,335. You can see some of that sentiment has already kind of peaked there on Bitcoin. Same on the Qs, getting very close to that 595 line, coming back down and now running up again. Pre-market, not very useful for determining which way the market's going to go. We'll be talking in the Alpha Report about ideas and projections in just a moment, as well as game plans for the day. But wow, Donald Trump taco. Again, I'm not here to imply that Donald Trump is lying, but I will tell you there's going to be a chorus of people on one side that say Donald Trump is full of crap. He saw the market's futures for the bond market, the stock market, and oil. Today was going to be a bloodbath in markets, and so Donald Trump needed to U-turn to save the market and his cronies' long positions. And in other words, he's potentially lying about actually having productive talks, and he's just leveraging nominal talks that were happening anyway. On the other hand, it's also possible that Iran is lying, that perhaps talks are actually happening, but they needed to save face to their population to make it seem like they're not rolling over to the Americans. The absolute truth, we may never know.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.